It's the Edible Valley Podcast. It's William Stringer. Welcome on board.
I'm Chef Jonathan Fraser, and we're here in studio at Jet FM, and we have a guest today.
Yeah, Comox Valley's best rock.
Welcome to the Edible Valley Podcast.
We want to invite you as we embark on a culinary journey through the heart of Vancouver Island
From the fertile fields,
to the pristine waters of the Pacific Ocean.
we'll explore the stories behind the food that nourishes us.
Tune in to each episode as we deep dive into the flavors, the traditions, and the innovations that make this a true paradise.
Now please join us as we explore our Edible Valley.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. As a frame of reference, it is a couple of days before February. We're very excited because we've got some snow arriving in the Comox Valley for the first time this year.
I know, it's just in time for me to get out of town.
Are you off? Are you off?
I am heading off in 2 weeks.
Oh, you're off down south.
I am heading to New Orleans, if anyone can't
It does
remember.
snow in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah, New Orleans.
That is going
I
to
know
be.
it was snowing in New Orleans, but apparently it's going to be warm because I'm down there for Super Bowl.
It's going to be. It's going to be in the 60s. We've got to talk in Fahrenheit.
I don't know. It's going to be awful. Anyways, I'm in Super Bowl time down in New Orleans with my lovely wife, and we're going to be down there interviewing, talking to hopefully a bunch of chefs, as well as she wants to talk to some of the players and interview the people playing the game. So
For your quote unquote other podcast.
the F3 podcast, have you heard of that one, Will?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Do I sound jealous? I'm John. I've got another podcast.
All right, we're getting off subject. We are here today because we want to talk a little bit about food. And of course, we got Valentine's Day just around the corner.
We do.
Yeah, so we thought we'd talk about some nice couples meals to pair together. And then if that doesn't work out, we're going to bring out talk a little bit about some spirits and stuff. Because I had a good friend who was just come in the studio to join us.
We've got a guest. Which is great.
We have with us the spirited chef, Taylor.
Hello. Thank you.
How are you doing?
Wonderful. It's great to be here and laughing with you already.
How is your voice better than ours? And this is the first time you've been on our podcast.
Because I used to sing.
Right.
Ah.
That was beautiful. Say it again. Say exactly what you just said again.
Because I used to sing.
Beautiful.
You just made Will's day here.
It's great. And it works. I've got the monitor in front of me with our sound levels, and I could hear the computer purring. You are an engineer's dream. So thank you so much for coming in on a cold Wednesday evening and talking to us in these downtown 98.9 Jet FM state-of-the-art studios. We're gonna,
My pleasure.
We're just going to fire some questions at you.
and just pick your brain. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into the cooking profession. What got you into food?
My adoptive father, when I was 4 years old, allowed me to stand on a stool in front of a gas stove and teaching me how to scramble eggs.
Wow.
After which I made them eggs every weekend. And because I couldn't reach the spice cupboard, I could only reach the baking cupboard. They had eggs flavored with almond and vanilla and any of, the
That's
baking
hilarious.
stuff. And that is the family story, is they never knew what kind of flavor the eggs were going to be.
But you definitely knew to add flavor.
Oh, yes. My darling adoptive mother was not, but that was not her strength.
Oh.
So I learned to cook very quickly. But I had give the grace to them for allowing me to stand in front of a stove when I was that young. And
Well, I mean, this is a really current thing for me because it takes when I've got a 22-month-old and I try and teach her. We cook a lot from scratch, and I take the time to teach her. But it's a lot of time. When you want to just chuck a couple of eggs in a frying pan, it suddenly becomes a 5-minute job, and you've wasted 2 eggs. So your parents, I immediately love because doing that is actually a big sacrifice, but it's clearly done what it's supposed
Dad,
to.
who is 89 now, still remembers us cooking together. And I mean, taking apart fish, and he'd
wow.
feed me the roe right out of the salmon fresh.
Oh, that's the
and I
best way.
couldn't even reach the counter. And it's those kinds of explorations, allowing those kind of explorations when your child is young. I've taught several classes at Cumberland Rec. Taught the kids 7 to 14 classes there. And it's one of my favorite things. And just allowing them to, just watching them get things that they love.
Yeah.
It's a very natural thing to become good at, to be given the ability to make your own food. It's almost like when a child is born. Almost sounds like I'm going to go into song here. When a child is born, it's not Christmas anymore. When a child is born, you know, there's a lot of stuff and you're like, wow, how do they know how to do that? Starting out with being able to feed, you know. And I always think, well, if you hand a kid an egg, are they going to just know how to crack the egg? In terms of my little Penelope, no. But, you know, she's got some great skills and some great instincts with cooking. And I kind of feel it's the same thing. Run with it. Run with the food.
And all you have to do is just provide the opportunity.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
With the young'uns in Cumberland, I would... the first thing I do, other than, you know, make sure you got your apron on and your hands washed and all the not in Chef Taylor's kitchen rules,
Right.
Is I hand them a big chef's knife, every single one of them. And sometimes the chef's knife is as long as their arm to their elbow. And I deliberately don't have parents in there because I don't want them saying, oh my God. And I teach them how to use a knife and the empowerment of learning how to use a chef's knife, even if you've got tiny little hands.
Oh, just to be comfortable with that. And
Is-
yeah, I love watching. And even getting a young child with a hot frying pan. You know, it's because a lot of times their parents are like, no, don't, you're going to burn yourself. And I'm like, you're going to burn yourself, but you're going to not do it twice, right?
Yes.
Yeah, you learn that lesson.
And here is how, if there's stuff in it, here's where you grab it so that you as a small person can do it. It's empowerment. It's all about empowerment.
Yeah, and that's the thing I love about teaching, and I know you've done a lot of teaching. But let's move on a little bit because we started very young, right off in the get-go. How did you get into this more of a professional?
Well, I decided I went to BCIT and took the hotel restaurant technology, it was called. And so it was hospitality administration. But there was it was a 2/3 academic and 1/3 practical. And part of that was everything from learning to mix drinks to being in the kitchen to dining room stuff. And so that sort of put a more formal slant on it, especially the setting my bangs on fire when I was doing the day of in dining room with the flambés.
Of course, yeah.
Yes.
You're not the first.
And then from there, I was, a catering director. And so I was selling food and selling, catering and making up stuff that the chefs had to make. Not how not to win friends and influence chefs, but thank goodness the stuff I did actually put together, they were. And then I took a left turn at Albuquerque and went and got my CGA. So that was another story.
So you stepped away for a while.
Yeah. So, and spent 25-ish years in the accounting world, but also doing a lot of hospitality related stuff.
Right.
And started my own destination wedding planning business, which also involved catering and a whole bunch of things while I was doing that. And then one day I walked away from accounting and said, done, I'm going to go back and get my chef's papers. So that's what I did.
Wow. When was this roughly?
2018.
Okay. Wowza.
And I already had, I was on Salt Spring Island at the time. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine was retiring from the RCMP, and she decided that she wanted to have a food truck as her retirement thing. So she was in the process of getting out of the RCMP, and I had a little bit of time on my hands. So I started the Salt Spring Islands' first big food truck with her. And so we did that for 2 years. So that's where I ended up being able to bank a bunch of my hours for my Red Seal. We opened up the T&A Cafe.
Okay.
Yes, it was Taylor and Angie.
Love it.
Yes, where everything is fresh.
Everything is fresh. Sounds good.
So that was sort of, mid-accounting career, end of accounting career too.
Right.
And then so I decided, no, I'm just going to go back and get my papers and do it. And it was great.
Wow. Yeah, you've got a fantastic website. Do you want to give that a quick plug actually? Because it really does. It's a good website and it talks about absolutely everything you do. You clearly do a wide variety of stuff.
It's really interesting, looking back, it sounds so old, that, we think we're led to believe that we need to sort of pick a career and do it. And thank goodness we're all of the generation that maybe we don't have to work 40 years and get a golden watch. And yes, that also may cost us our financial security. But on the other hand, life is about learning and life is about adventuring and life is about trying to find the happy.
Yeah.
And if you're not happy for yourself, you're not happy for anybody else. So having
Yeah.
several tools in my toolkit, I'm always looking for opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
And my next big lesson is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And that's what I'm learning.
I so wish I'd learned that so long ago.
I still haven't learned it properly.
Still working on that one. Just because you can, yeah. No, exactly. There's so many times I've done, why did I do that? I'm like, yeah, I can do it, but why? But anyways, I always love being with you and hanging out and cooking with you because you have such a passion for your food and you have such an understanding of it and you love to find out new ideas and work with it. So just plugging a little thing about how much fun I've enjoyed working with you.
It is fun. It's great.
Yeah, and we've only known each other a short while and I think really one of the first times was like doing one of the back to basics at the farmer's market.
Which we'll be doing again.
That's right.
At the beginning of March.
Yeah, a little sugar shack time at the market. But it was one of those ones I know you were kind of like, I don't know how we're going to work together and I don't know, how do you do this?
Because it's always, oh God, am I going to live up to expectations? And it's like, you know what? It was so easy working with you and it was just great and fun. And we laughed. So that was...
And that's part of cooking. I mean, if there's no point in cooking unless you're having fun. At least that's my feeling.
And it's a hard profession.
Oh, totally.
I cannot get through how many people, say to me, well, I want to be a chef. I want to be a chef. And it's like, okay, go wash dishes for 10 hours for 6 months and come back and we'll talk. Well, why do I have to wash dishes? Because you're going to be doing a lot of that.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then we can start.
Now, funny thing is, when I was about 16, I forgot about this, but I worked in a little restaurant near me called The Harvester, just outside London.
Pretty sure they haven't forgotten about you there.
It shut down, no connection. And I was doing dishes. And back then I was 16. I was doing dish pit and I was just eating all the food.
That is one of the benefits of doing dish pit.
Yeah. They tried me. They said, oh, we're going to get you on the grill. Now, I'm a good talker, and every now and then people mistake that for me being intelligent. And that's always funny. So they put me on the grill. What do you reckon happened? Not very happy customers.
Well, was it you or the food that went up in flames?
Oh, my brain. I said, I'm not doing this because it's too hot. You didn't tell me it was going to be hot standing at the grill. But it really did show me, though. And it showed me that my life was not going to be in the kitchen because, I would have excelled in some way. I would have thought, I'm going to push this to be doing this, but I didn't want to. Now, the only reason I like being that side of the kitchen was because you can nick chips out of the pan and no one can notice.
And nobody underestimates the value of having a person in the dish pit. Because you try to, you can never underestimate the value
having
of that.
a good person that can keep up to dishes is a godsend anywhere.
It really is.
Yeah. I remember, though, I wasn't particularly good at that either, actually. But I did a good enough job. I was better than nothing. I think that was what they were thinking.
See, William used to be my helper for the emergency food program when COVID hit and everything went down. And they're like, you need to have someone who's really close. And I said, well, William's my roommate, so
that's close.
Let's close this. Yeah, we're in the same bubble.
That was good. Early COVID times.
Early COVID times. And Will would come in there and he would just scoop food into cups and then tell me really ridiculous stories, which would keep me going for the day.
Humor.
And we would just keep going. And that's sort of how the podcast became. I'm like, we should just sit down and do podcast.
That's awesome.
And the pandemic days, weren't they good for that?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's another podcast.
That's another podcast.
That's another podcast. Food in the pandemic is another podcast.
Yes. So we're getting a little bit away from what we initially came here to do because we want to talk about having nice couples meals.
Or pals meals.
Pals meals. I love this one. But you
Palantines and Valentines.
Palantines
and Valentines because not everybody has their
I think
little
that's
their
wonderful.
shoe that fits. It's so you grab your best pal
love
and spend
that.
some quality time either cooking with them or enjoying.
Happy Valentine's, happy Palantines.
I'm going to invite you over. You and me are going to cook together, Will.
All right.
There generally must be some sort of spirits or sparkling something involved as well before. And
only if you make your famous focaccia bread.
No, we'll do that.
He hasn't taught me how to make his famous focaccia bread.
It's so good. And he's so, he makes it I might go, I swept the kitchen floor today, honey. He's like, I made a focaccia, just handed it to you. World's best focaccia. He's almost cocky. I like it.
Well, so yes, and it doesn't have to be on Valentine's Day. It can be the day before or the day afterwards, but trying to find one thing I do love about, holidays in general, Christmas Eve and whatever, even though people tend to poo-poo it, is that we mindfully and intentionally choose to make time with people we care about. And to layer on top of that some of the best drinks and some of the most decadent food you can think about, butter dripping through your fingers and all sorts of things like that. What more can you ask for? Like you're making happy memories.
Right.
And that is so, so important in this crazy world of life that we have.
And I think that's part
it
of
really is.
getting together with someone and just cooking a meal together. Like just to have that enjoyment and have that fun.
And not that it isn't lovely to be able to go to all of the fabulous restaurants that we have here in the Comox Valley and support them as well. It's lovely to have somebody cooking for you. And there are people I've discovered that whose talent is not cooking. Being able to have somebody out there that, to be able to go to a restaurant is lovely. But also to, gather your ingredients and just come in and just sit and do your thing. It's so great.
So what are, let's say for some people who are wanting to break into this. So
yes.
Let's say we're sort of trying to put a menu together for some people. Not say a menu, but just some meal ideas that you think you'd recommend for people to work on.
We live 15 minutes from some of the best oysters in Canada.
Oh, yeah. In North America.
And well, I worked on PEI for a year, so I don't know. I'm going to fight you on that one
Yeah,
a little bit, but it's a really tough choice.
Shellfish walls.
But yes, that is would be my first go-to is the oysters. And if you just can't do oysters, then find the mussels, because the mussels are also amazing. And that's where and I'm sure John would be happy to share his famous focaccia bread recipe. If you do the mussels with, for example, your favorite wine or beer and some double smoked bacon and some fennel juice and just scatter the fennel fronds on top and, pickle some of them and do that with the mussels. Or if you make an amazing mignonette to go with the raw oysters. Something with maybe a little bit of the Cure hot sauce with some fresh... Well, going with a 100-mile diet, I'm thinking the only thing that's really available right now is cellared apples and pears and stuff like that. But go with that and something hot flakes and a little bit of lemon and away you go with the oysters. I mean, there's so many things you can just dream up in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Finding fresh horseradish is always amazing, but learning to shuck is fun.
Yeah.
One of my dear friends is coming from PEI next week, and I'm going to get a refresher because her father was the oyster whisperer. But having that, seafood is sensuous. Now, whether it's a pal with benefits, or your other half, you have to. Food is sensual, right?
Yes.
And if you got an excuse to enjoy it that way, then it's great. It just adds another layer. That's what I would start with, would be oysters or something like mussels and some lovely bread or something like that to sop up the good bits.
Yeah, because you know what? You can have lots of great conversation over something like that, like some nice steamed mussels with some nice focaccia bread. It's not something you're going to, shovel down like a hamburger or something like that. You're going to take and delicately eat it and really enjoy those flavors.
And it doesn't matter whether you like spirits or wine or beer. Both of those things, both oysters and mussels, go well with any of those things. So
nice. Yeah.
And you can use the whatever it is that you're enjoying drinking in a sauce or in making it, which is why I do the spirited chef thing, because I put a lot of, I try to either pair my food, make the food to go with a particular spirit or wine or whatever, or it goes in the food. And so.
Nice.
I'm getting hungry here.
I know. I was just thinking I've got a cheese sandwich for dinner.
Well, it's all about flavor, right? And
so
you go through that first course, and that's probably taken depending on how much fun you have, trying to get how many times you've cut your hand opening the oysters.
Yeah.
And then what do you move on to?
That's a good question. What would you recommend? Where's your thoughts going here?
Well, it's cold. It's cold outside, and so if you've gone with the oysters, you haven't had anything warm, right? So I would say a soup or a bisque of some sort.
There you go.
There's one that I make for Christmas time, but it still would work, and it's mushrooms and hazelnuts together.
Oh yeah, good
with some
combo.
fresh thyme and garlic, and it's finished with Greek yogurt and something that's rich You only need a mugful, right? But it doesn't take long to put together any sort of, I call it sort of single flavor based thing. So it doesn't need to be a big bowl of chicken soup with 16 different ingredients.
Yes.
You can choose a theme,
Yeah.
your squash, your mushrooms, your, whatever it is, and just add other bits of flavor into it, right?
So easy to keep it simple, right?
And,
and
get a good stock base and away you go.
I'm thinking for something like this, you're going straight to the blender.
Yep.
A nice creamy,
Or
smooth,
hand.
a hand
Yeah.
blender.
Yeah.
There's so many easy ways. And,
And
all
then-
you need is like onions, maybe some garlic.
And some fresh herbs to finish it off after you
yeah,
blended it, to finish it off, fresh thyme or whatever. And if you're doing something like that, if you've got roasted hazelnuts in it or whatever, just save some for the garnish. So you got some
Yeah.
crunch afterwards and some brightness of the herbs, and it's yummy.
It's all about that balance when you're working with things like that.
And making sure there's umami to it too. Because if everything stays too sweet, then you've eaten your bowl of soup. I've seen this with lots of vegetable soups and things where
Yeah.
everything is too sweet and well, I would call it too sweet. And so you finish the soup and you're still looking for something more because your palate has not been satisfied on the oil part or the umami part or the,
We
So-
should have had you along for our umami episode.
Yeah.
An
'cause
umami episode.
Yeah.
Well, it was one I just taught in class to
Oh,
all the
excellent.
students. And
Yes.
so I was like, let's really
That's
get
right.
into this,
Yes.
Like, and umami's so many places. And I know everyone's like, I'm allergic to it, but you can't.
Not everything that produces umami you can't be allergic to.
Anyways, there's so many things you can add to your food just to bring it to the next level. So whether that's some mushrooms or some tomatoes, right? They all hold that beautiful flavor in them. So
And also, this is one of the things that I teach is in my flavor class is going back to, for example, the flavors in India are through Ayurveda, which is the health, right? And so there's 7 flavors that that they believe should be in every single meal.
Really?
And so you need the sweet, the hot, the sour, the fat, like all of these things. And if there's a little bit of it in the whole meal, then even if your meal is small, you will feel satisfied and you'll nourish your body. And so it's making sure that you've checked out that you've got all of these things, or at least in the overall meal, you've got all of these
I love
things.
that. That feels very right to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it nourishes your body, which again, then it leaves you not wanting
Yeah.
more. But speaking of more, what's for the main course, Chef Jonathan?
ooh, that is such. I'm looking at so many different ways to go there. I mean, my wife and me, it's usually something vegetarian.
Well, we've had a vegetarian soup,
We had
essentially.
the vegetarian soup.
Because it could have been a roasted squash soup or something too,
Even then, just having something roasted in the oven's always so nice. It's it's something you can slice thin, and I mean, a beautiful Chateaubriand is always a beautiful way to finish it. It's a little bit of work.
It is. Yeah. And it does take, people go, oh my God, I could spend that much money on it, I might ruin it.
I know. That's the
Have a
thing.
thermometer. Just buy yourself a digital thermometer and make sure you know when to take it out. And remember, there's going to be some carryover cooking. So when you take it out of the oven and it's a certain temperature, it's going to get more cooked.
That's
so
right.
think about it.
Let it rest. Give
rest.
it some time. So so I'm thinking like something roasted in the oven. Like give yourself, you've been working hard with all these other things. Something you just set in the oven seems really nice. So.
And the vegetables and whatever around it to go with it.
Just to bring it, just to bring all that aromatics together, bring those flavors together.
And if the Chateaubriand is out of your range, like if you've spent more money on oysters than would have liked,
Intended?
a really lovely local pork tenderloin
That was my
works
next one.
perfectly. And it's about a quarter of the price, and you just handle it delicately and mustard on top and what have you. Not French's mustard. Something from the mustard lady. Something from local,
Oh, yeah,
right? On top
nice local,
and again crushed nuts or whatever it is on top, and just let it roast.
Some
Take
really
the juices
nice
out of it.
coarse salt and some fresh cracked pepper on there. And just like a nice slow cook on it, right? And just
And again, watch the temperature of that one too. But then you can take it out, let it rest, and then and you've got your vegetables, and you've got some pan juices that you can throw some wine in, and take 2 seconds and throw some butter, and away you go.
It's super easy, and there's something you can share, right? Like,
Yeah.
especially a pork tenderloin is just a perfect size,
Yeah.
right? Just one loin. It's fairly inexpensive.
That was a fish.
The video's not working anymore. No one knows.
Okay, well, what do you like for dessert?
Oh, well, I mean, I was just listening to that whole thing drooling, and then I thought, this is way above my station in terms of the cookery, and I'm thinking, well, you could add some mayonnaise or something that's just not what you should do, but that's my answer to everything. Add mayonnaise or cheese. And then desserts, obviously going to be add chocolate. No, don't ask me about food. He said on the podcast. Because
But what do you like?
Rudimentary. So I would go, I don't know, for a mousse, maybe a chocolate mousse, maybe a tiramisu.
And would you buy this made by a local bakery, or would you make it yourself?
I would make it. You know what I would do? I'd go onto TikTok and I would use a recipe from TikTok. The amount of things you can make. I made a bread pudding from 3 ingredients the other night. It's so easy.
That's all
Then instantly I made the bread from scratch as well. You know, I'd crack 3. This is what I'd do. It'd be rustic as anything, but I would crack 3 eggs into a little pan, add some sugar, or maple syrup, whisk it. Then I'd get some homemade bread and I'd rip it up, push it in there, and then I'd stick it in the air fryer for about 15 minutes at about 330. And then it would come out, be absolutely beautiful, and then a little bit of powdered sugar over the top of that, and I'd serve it.
You know what? I love that he said air fryer and you didn't freak.
It's all a matter of cooking. I mean, I don't have a lot of space in my house to cook, so I have a toaster oven, and it's amazing what you can do in a large toaster oven. That would be good, and especially if you put a little pot on the stove and melted some unsalted butter and put a little bit of that maple syrup or whatever in it, and then tipped some rum or some brandy or something into it, and then just like poured it over your bread pudding when it came out.
Great idea.
Such beautiful.
And maybe some vanilla ice cream or something. But no, you can just get right into the bread pudding. I love rustic things. And don't get me wrong, I love the mousse idea, etc.
Oh, yeah.
But I love rustic things like bread pudding. Because especially if you can go to some of our local bakeries and they have the day-old section, and you grab a bag of cinnamon buns.
Nice.
And some like other bread, and you can use different things. It doesn't have to be just bread.
I think that's the misconception that most people have. They're like, no, it has to be white bread, blah, blah. I'm like, no.
I used very much wholemeal bread to use it, and it was very dense, and it still worked really well in that recipe.
But
it'd be very filling.
Cinnamon bun, like, hello.
Well, it's just, it's being able to use all sorts of things or, I've got quarter of a cake or something in the freezer. And it's like, well, chop some of that up and put it in there. I don't know. It's, again, for me, it's all about flavor. Is texture and all those things are so important, but flavor is something, and having a surprise in your flavor and having something that people don't expect. And it's like, it's just so lovely to put that together.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Fun today. We did at the school. I just we did a caramel anglaise, and I threw some rosemary in there just to throw them off. And it was just everyone was coming up like, rosemary creme anglaise, and I'm like, and it was a caramel creme anglaise, and I'm like, yep. And they're like, what? And I'm like, just try it. And they're like, you see those light bulbs. They're like, this is amazing.
The juxtaposition of savory and sweet. Because I like sweet stuff a little bit, but I've never really had a sweet tooth, as it were. So anytime I make something sweet, I'm usually like throwing something in there as a bit of a savory surprise.
Yeah.
And also when I'm cooking savory things, there are sweet things like nutmeg and cardamom that I'll put in like just enough of something like that in. So people go, there's something in here I recognize, and it's delicious, but I can't quite put my finger on it.
That's what I love about nutmeg is you put just enough that no one notices it.
But they know there's something different.
Yeah, they know.
And then cardamom does that for me too, the green cardamom. And it's just, it's like, oh, darn, these potatoes are good. It's like, what is that?
I used to put cinnamon in my tomato sauce all the time. They're like, this tomato sauce is so good. And I'm like, yeah, it's just tomato sauce. And like, but there's something in there. I'm like, it's cinnamon. And they're like, what? Like, no, it doesn't taste like cinnamon. I'm like, no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. This is where I get all glossy and eyed about food. The exploration of it is so wonderful. And that's why that's what I want to do is food.
Well, and that's why we both do it, right?
All right. Well, our 20-minute podcast is now 35 minutes.
Well, we're dragging on, but I'm enjoying myself. I do want to talk to you just a little bit, give me some time here. Well,
I'm not in bed. I need to get Penelope to bed.
I know. Anyways,
But I'm good for a few minutes.
I did want to bug you. You were just down in Victoria, and you invited me down there, and
Yes.
unfortunately, I couldn't go. And you were down at the Whiskey Festival there.
Yes. Victoria Whisky Festival.
Victoria Whisky Festival. And literally, she's like, and I was like, I made plans. And she's like, but I have tickets. I'm like, and I tried to cancel, and then didn't work. But you were able to go down and
Yes.
got to have some fabulous.
Yes, it is
times.
always an amazing experience. And I take it, well, there's a whole bunch of us that we get to see each other. There's people from all over Canada, from the States, from Scotland, obviously, and some people came over from New Zealand this year. It's one of the two biggest festivals in Canada for whiskey or spirits. Grand tastings, they call them, large amounts of people in a room. There's master classes all day Saturday. And there's the thing that I invited Jonathan for was there's a big sort of taste everything you could possibly think of on the Saturday night. There's two great big, one large and one smaller ballroom filled all with whiskey.
Wow.
With all the different distillers and bottlers, private bottlers, and from all over the place. There's always a takeaway. I mean, the whiskey fabric, as it's called, are the people that weave themselves into people who love whiskey. And even though you don't know somebody halfway across the globe, if somebody says, hey, we'll talk to such and such, it's an amazing, amazing group of people from all over the world. Do anything for each other. And everybody's always trying to learn, from the bigger producers down to the craft ones, which are my favorite. They're always trying to learn and very humble, which I love about that. But also the chance of just getting to see your pals once and twice a year and doing some of the most amazing things, tasting this sometimes interesting whiskey and sometimes just like knock your socks off, melt your knees whiskey.
And there's not just whiskey there too, right?
That one is just whiskey.
Just whiskey,
but
but
I mean, I can't say just whiskey because there's bourbon. I mean, and like it's all of it: the bourbon, the rye, and the Scotch, and other things that fall under Canadian whiskey and American whiskey, which has just been given the proper designation. And then from India, which are some of my very, very favorites. That was one of my takeaways. A new to me producer from India called Indri. And, from Finland, and it's just amazing.
All the different varieties.
And the thing that I love about this festival is often some of the distillers will actually be there rather than just the sales reps. It'll be the distillers or the brand educators.
Oh, yeah, you want them.
And so when you're sitting in their class, you are learning so much. And the stories of everybody is just amazing.
Well, it's the experience, isn't it? You go there for the experience.
And that one is specifically about the whiskey. The one I was at a couple of years ago, which you'll see on my Insta feed, was the New Brunswick Spirits Festival. And I was asked to design all the meals. So they do more teaching or more of their tastings with actual meals. So they asked me to design all of the meals to go with. I was told what was going to be served or who was sponsoring that particular meal. And so I had to make up all of the meals for each
different one.
Each tasting and work with the chef at the hotel that was putting it on to make sure that, they had the right recipes. And, New Brunswick in November is not exactly farm to table. So working with that, but it's those kinds of experiences.
How do you find yourself with trying to pair whiskeys and stuff with food? Like, just definitely how do you, like, wine seems to be very easy to pair with, but do you find like using harder alcohols a little more difficult? Or
I don't, because I love it. And people, I mean, and especially cask strength stuff, where it's just what you're getting, what the distiller intended. So much, just a quick side thing, so much of the whiskey that people first try, just like wines, is, down to 40%. And it's been all of the essence of what the distiller wanted is gone or not, reduced.
right.
But it's figuring out what notes are in the whiskey. What do you taste? Maybe what different will you taste? But then finding things that bring those things out. So if I have a sip of this whiskey and I have some of that soup that I was talking about, the mushroom soup with the fresh thyme, it makes the soup taste more mushroomy and more thymy.
Nice.
And then when you go back to the whiskey, it tastes, you can taste the earthiness because you've had mushrooms. And so you get the earthiness out of a Speyside or whatever. And it's just over the saltiness. And it's just lovely to be able to do that. But it takes some concentration and focus and learning. And
Yeah. No, it's not something you do overnight, but it's amazing when you hit it right. You know, like being able to take those notes of what you're trying to amplify. It always blows my mind how different things can taste when you taste something else, right? Like,
Well, and either with it or, like specifically with something. But also, I mean, I've seen and read many reviews of whiskeys and tasting notes of whiskeys from people that I really respect. But they're like lists this long for the nose, the palate, and the finish. And it's like, okay, I need 3 things.
Yeah.
I need 3 things from the nose, 3 things from the palate, and 3 things from the finish. And what's the top 3? Because otherwise, not everybody has. I have a pretty good palate, but not everybody has. Can taste 16 things or smell 16 things. The point is, like everything, like food or whatever, it's what do you enjoy? What do you taste? What brings you back to that?
Yeah.
And it's for sharing, but that's another concept.
Well, I'm feeling like we need to get a bottle of whiskey,
Oh, yeah, that would be nice.
some mussels.
Oh, yes.
And Fritz, if we're going to do that.
Fritz?
Yeah.
I will bring some of my focaccia bread, which apparently is legendary. And then we will
feast.
have a feast.
We'll feast.
Excellent. Well, I think we're getting a little long on time. And thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us
It's been a
today.
pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I know you were a little hesitant at first, but I'm like, come on in.
No, natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Once you do this once or twice, it gets to be a bit of a thing. So this is where I learn about food more than anywhere else, is just sitting down and chatting with people. So
It is.
And always learning.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. Cheers.
yeah. So I guess we have to do a little thanks for listening to the Edible Valley podcast.
Yes.
Don't forget to follow us on all of those wonderful social media apps like TikTok and Facebook and
We're not on TikTok, are we?
oh yeah, totally on TikTok.
Truth Social. Obviously.
You know what? Yeah, Truth Social. No, I put us on. We're on Blue Sky now.
Oh, yeah.
I got 101 followers on Blue Sky now.
Oh, nice.
I thought
Fair
I'd try that out. I don't know what I'm doing, but I just make posts and take pictures of my food. It's all fun, right? Actually, I don't even take my food pictures. I take pictures of my students' foods and post them up there. So,
Oh, well, thank you very much again for
Thank
following
you
us on
very much.
another lovely episode of the Edible Valley podcast. We'll be back in a fortnight.
Right.
And just again, you two were just bouncing off each other so well, and the knowledge of, I was hypnotized. It's easy to have a
It's
good
so
one.
fun.
you have 2 chefs, you throw in some food, and this is how it goes.
Yes.
This is what our chefs' meetings always turn into, too. So,
And last plug for your website, actually.
So the Spirited Chef is something I built with a lot of love, and does say I just poured my heart out in everything that I want to ever do and everything that I have done in that website.
Amazing.
So, and there's a
Spirited
blog
Chef.
that will be resuscitated. It's gone to sleep because figured out that I can't sustainably keep up 18 hours to do each podcast.
But
or
a lot of really good stuff into
Yeah.
the ones you've already done, though.
So
it's
it'll
worth
just be a
checking out.
reworking of something like that
Yeah,
shortly. But yes,
amazing.
please do visit thespiritedchef.ca. On Insta, it's thespiritedchef_Taylor with an E at the end.
Okay. Have a good one. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
thank you.